Um, Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chet Kerr. I'm on the board of the Irvington Historical Society, and I want to welcome you all today to this wonderful talk about the county park system in Westchester, which is, as you'll hear, a very unique part of our parks and our county, and it's a real treasure. And a couple of preliminary thoughts beforehand. One is we are recording this, and we will be posting the video of this presentation up on our website after the fact in a couple of days. We are going to do a question and answer session at the end of the presentation by Barbara. But if you have questions as the presentation goes along or at the end, you should put them in the chat, and then Barbara can go through the chat and read your questions and answer them as she can. So with that, let me just start by introducing our speaker today. Barbara Davis is the co-director of the Westchester County Historical Society, where she's responsible for the programming, publicity, and other operations of WCHS, which is the only organization that collects and promotes the countrywide history of Westchester. A resident of New Rochelle, she is also the New Rochelle City Historian, a position she has held since 2001. And is the former community relations coordinator for the New Rochelle Public Library. Barbara has served on the Westchester County Historic Preservation Advisory Committee since the early 1900s, and as chair, sorry, 19, I guess, I may have said that wrong, for a while, 1990s, and as a chair for over 25 years. Excuse me, Barbara,
That's okay, it feels like it.
Right. So with that, I'd like to introduce Barbara, and I look forward to hearing your presentation. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Chet. And really, sometimes serving on the county's Historic Preservation Advisory Committee for over 30 years, or just about 30 years, sometimes it does feel like I've been on it since the early 1900s. But anyway, it's a pleasure being with you all this soggy afternoon. And I am delighted to bring the story of America's first county park system, which was the Westchester County Park System, to you. Give me 1 second here to get all set up. And we'll get started. So I have to tell you personally, I thank the Westchester Park Commission and have been ever since I learned that they were the ones responsible for saving Glen Island from becoming a garbage dump. And after preparing this preparation, my gratitude is even more profound. The images you're going to see in this program are primarily from Westchester County Historical Society's collection. We have a collection of over 90,000 images online now, as well as the county archives. You can access these extensive image collections online, and much of the information came from reports such as the one you see in front of you. These annual reports were done during the Park Commission's existence, and they are just a wealth of information, also available online. 100 years ago in 1922, a group of Westchester men and women were appointed by the Board of Supervisors, they're shown here, no women, to serve on a citizen committee to create a park system. In just a few years, the Westchester Park Commission would create a premier system that not only shaped the future of the county, it would also serve as a model for regions around the world, and it did so in just a few years. The focus of this presentation, 1922 to 1929, when the crash and depression brought a close to this extraordinary and visionary endeavor. How extraordinary? Well, let's see. Here's a headline from the February 6, 1922 New York Times. The article states, the Westchester County authorities are now considering plans for a $10 million park project, provided necessary legislative sanction can be obtained. A chain of parks connected by parkways, stretching all the way from the Hudson River to near Croton Point to Long Island Sound, with one large tract in the southern portion suitable for the propagation of wildlife, would form, as planned, one of the most extensive and elaborate pleasure grounds in the world within a few years, if the legislature gives its consent. The Mahansic State Reservation, a beautiful tract in Yorktown, would be included in the new park system. Well, the legislature did give its consent. That was the Board of Supervisors, and the Westchester Park Commission was formed. This commission would successfully oversee the acquisition of land, the design and construction, and ultimately the maintenance of the first county park system in America. It all started with the Bronx River Parkway Reservation. The concept of a roadway with parkland was first floated as early as 1895 in legislation that created the Bronx Valley Sewer Commission. This was a group to address the open sewer that was flowing into the New York Zoological Park, the Bronx River. The commission was appointed in 1906 and planning began the next year, although funding for the acquisition of property wasn't realized until 1917. When the initial road from Valhalla into the Bronx was completed in 1925, the Bronx River Parkway was the first modern multi-lane limited access parkway in North America. From the start, the intention was to create a roadway that would not only solve the problem of sewage pollution, flooding, and accompanying health nuisances, but would also be an aesthetically pleasing, nature-filled tract of land. Undeveloped land was quickly acquired and condemnation proceedings led to the removal of billboards, old buildings, and shacks all along the river. The commission hid from view the unsightly tracks of the New York Central Railroad, which paralleled the river, and they did this by planting trees along the rail embankments. It also built stone bridges for vehicular traffic passing over the valley and maintained eye-appealing topography. The river could be seen from various vantage points. In retrospect, it was an audacious endeavor, made possible by William L. Ward, commonly referred to as Boss Ward. Ward was a prominent mechanical engineer and inventor and proprietor of the Russell, Birdsall, and Ward Bolton Nut Company, whose extensive factory on Midland Avenue in Portchester was for many years a principal employer in Westchester County. For 35 years, he was the chairman of the county's Republican Party. He was a Quaker and a reserved man who shunned publicity and photographs. We have very few. Here's a photo of the house built by Mr. Ward in Rybrook as his private home in 1873 to 1876. The Ward Castle, as it is now called, is the oldest extant reinforced concrete structure in the United States and is on the National Register. Quote, his face lighted up and his gray eyes sparkled with youthful vitality when he spoke of things that would make Westchester a happier and better place in which to live, was a quote included in his obituary. Frequently referred to as an amiable autocrat and a benevolent despot, even by FDR, who attended the opening of the Bronx Parkway extension with Mr. Ward, and seen here. Under Ward's benevolent dictatorship, the extraordinary success of the Bronx River Parkway Reservation Commission led to the establishment of the Westchester Park Commission. As with the BRP Commission, the Park Commission was given ultimate power to purchase land and to create a diverse array of public parks. It was an independent entity answering only to Ward, not to county government or legislators. So as the Bronx River Parkway was nearing completion, its commission was basically expanded to become the Westchester Park Commission. Jay Downer, the engineering mastermind of the Bronx River Parkway and the county engineer, would serve as its chief from 1923 to 1935. Whereas Ward was the power broker, so to speak, Downer was the mastermind. Mr. Downer, a Princeton graduate, resided for most of his Westchester years in Scarsdale. His work after Westchester would include Idlewild Airport, Rockefeller Center, and the New York World's Fair. Landscape architect, civil engineer, professor of city and regional planning, Gilmore D. Clark was mastermind number 2. Clark graduated from Cornell in 1913 and would have an illustrious career here and beyond, including chairman of the National Commission of Fine Arts, a member of the Board of Design of the 1939 World's Fair, and an architectural consultant on the United Nations headquarters. And he was a fine-looking chap, if I do say so myself. There were many great talents in this endeavor. From this chart, you get an idea of the complexity of the operation. With Jay Downer in the center, engineering and construction, L.G. Holloran was a key player, executive work by Edward Aingerberg, and you see all the various other departments, including real estate acquisition, maintenance, public information by James Owen, who was amazing, and the construction, field engineering. It was a complex process. The Commission of Citizens was appointed at the April 17, 1922 meeting with geographic representation of the county, if not socioeconomic. These were the prominent names of the day, and you see from whence they hailed. Sorry, no river towns here. The commission's office was set up in an old ivy-covered stone building right off the Parkway in Bronxville. It had served as the offices for the commission, the Parkway Commission's business and engineering departments. And after the property was officially transferred to the county, the interiors were remodeled to house all headquarters offices, including a branch of the legal department for the Park Commission. The first year of the commission, the group outlined 3 major planning considerations. They were really, really intent on serving the needs of the cities in the lower part of the county, where it was denser, where suitable parks would be really difficult to purchase if they weren't done now. Additional beaches on both sides, both are beautiful bodies of water, and the protection, the conservation of our land along streams, which would also give a route for the trunk sewers and parkways for trucking and pleasure vehicles. The commission's grand vision was a series of roadways in nature-filled settings that would accommodate the growing needs of motorized transport and soft sewage and flooding. These parkways would connect a variety of tracts of land, providing recreational and health-promoting activities while conserving open land, woodlands, and open areas, protecting wildlife. Recognizing this was do or die time, given the rapid growth and development of the county, the commission purchased an extraordinary number of properties right off the bat and invested in nearly 15,000 acres. That's not far off from what we have today. With the intent of securing large tracts owned by single entities so as not to go through the taking, the condemnation of property, they look for land in or abutting watershed for large undeveloped and unwanted tracts. This would include that initial acquisition we heard about of the Mohansick Park Reservation. This parcel had been the site of the Mohansick State Hospital for the insane. And the hospital was growing bigger and bigger, and the community was getting more upset. And the local merchants association started petitioning the state, forcing the state to move the hospital upstate. Mohansick Lake Reservation was then conveyed to the county of Westchester for the sum of $1. Off to a roaring start, the Park Commission touted in its first report that thousands of picnickers and campers enjoyed the reservation the first year. A nursery was established and 1,000 red pines and 24,000 evergreen seedlings were planted. Native trees and shrubs were collected from wooded portions of the park and planted in the nursery for development and future use. The next year, 1923, a countywide recreational event for children, Play Day, attracted thousands of children. This same year, work started on the county's first 18-hole golf course. The golf course clubhouse, the pro shop, and starters booth, all constructed in coursed fieldstone with slate gable roofs, were completed in 1925 in designs keeping with the privately owned golf clubs of the period, as you can see here. Although the golf course is still county owned and operated, the state reacquired the park in 1957 and renamed it Franklin D. Roosevelt State Park in 1982. Another ready acquisition was the Miller farmhouse and property. The 17th century farmhouse just off the Bronx River Parkway had been acquired by the county in 1917. The Miller House was the home of Ann Fisher Miller, a widow of the Westchester militiaman Elijah Miller. The structure is not only a rare example of colonial vernacular, the property played a significant role in the 1776 Battle of White Plains. The property was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1976. The Commission's early acquisitions can be seen on these two maps. The one on the left was from 1924. You see the black outlines of the acquisitions. And the one in 1926, they are considerably more and larger. The already completed Bronx River Parkway was the model. As its chief engineer, Danner described it, quote, the attractiveness of the parkway having a length of 15.5 miles through this reservation will, as it becomes better known, make it world famous. From Bronx Park in a motor car, one moves swiftly over the smoothly paved 40-foot drive, following an alignment of ever-varying graceful curves with gentle undulations of grade. I can't help but think on my own, when I was a kid, of that big bump on the Bronx River Parkway that would send us in the back of the station wagon up to the ceiling. To continue, landscape architect Herman Merkel and field supervisor Gilmore Clark ensured the park-like experience with the open space, woodland, and rocky ledges, and views that always included the river. The automobile and footbridges continue to be highly important contributing factors. At the northern terminus of the county stretch, the Kensico Dam was built under the old dam that formed Lake Kensico using stone taken from the now adjacent Cranberry Lake Park. Built largely by immigrants from Italy, the dam was completed in 1915. But it became the northern terminus, and later the park was developed. Then a spot right off the parkway was deemed an ideal location for a large, centralized, and accessible gathering place for a myriad of recreational opportunities. Begun in 1924, the architectural firm of Walker and Gillette employed the popular Art Deco style for the 100,000 square foot building. The striking county center, which opened for festivals, athletic events, expositions, art and dance workshops in 1930, was conceived of and managed by the Westchester Recreation Commission, not the Park Commission, Recreation Commission. This group was appointed in 1924 as a separate entity and was comprised of 5 women, quote, prominent in social and civic life, said the New York Times. They also were very sort of sly in their headline, 5 women to teach a county to play. The chair was Agnes Meyer, who told the Times, what we in Westchester are aiming to do with our recreation program is to emphasize the fact that the human spirit is as much in need of exercise as the human body. She said the commission was concerned with health, strength, and joy in life among rich and poor. Later, the newly appointed superintendent of recreation told American City magazine that the commission was formed to establish ethical standards of play and clean, wholesome bodies at all county parks. Well, these women worked hard to keep up with the number of parks being added each year. So on the left, you see Eugene and Agnes Meyer's home called Seven Springs in Mount Kisco. It's been in and out of the news because it is now owned by Donald Trump and is part of one of the lawsuits. But as you might know, they were the parents of Katharine Graham and were the founders of the Washington Post. The roads intended to connect the parks and provide for world-class recreational motoring. For them, the county looked to the county's valleys and to its population needs. Plans for 3 north-south parkways to parallel the Bronx River Parkway were set in motion. In early 1924, the Board of Supervisors authorized the construction of the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Saw Mill River Parkway, and the Sprainbrook Parkway, but that one would not be realized until the 1950s, and that's a whole nother story. The extraordinary growth in Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, Pelham, Eastchester, and the impact of this growth on the water supply, coupled with the unbearable traffic along US 1, shown here, paralleling Long Island Sound, led to the parkway that would be named for Anne Hutchinson. Construction of the Hutch began in 1924. It would require the condemnation of scores of houses and businesses. Some were physically moved. I have a friend that lives in one that was physically moved. But with all parkway construction, the emotional toll of the taking of property cannot be calculated. J. Downer and Gilmore Clark designed the Hutchinson River Parkway on the model of the Bronx River, curving through a river valley over rolling terrain and passing a diversity of ecosystems. Like the Bronx River Parkway, it is a limited access highway over most of its route, with 13 grade separations for main intersecting roads. And the build features were natural and rustic, the landscaping consisting of wide grassy shoulders with native trees and plantings along the river. Just recently, part of the Hutch has been determined eligible for listing on the National Register, which I have to say sort of surprises me because they've changed so many of the gorgeous bridges that Downer designed. So the first 2 miles in Pelham were completed in 1927. The acquisition of 2 lower reservoirs right near New Rochelle, or in New Rochelle and Eastchester, resulted in a more scenic drive and a better alignment along with the new rail line, New York, Westchester, and Boston Rail. And then in 1928, 11 miles of the parkway between US 1 and Pelham and Westchester Avenue and White Plains were completed. Excuse me, these also feature bridle paths along the route and stables where the public could rent horses. The total price tag of the Hutch was $12 million. Now, I always say when I'm giving this talk, when you hear an amount given, you can times it by 16 to get a rough idea of what it would be in today's prices. So for the Hutch, $194.5 million. Early on, the commission purchased 23 wooded acres in Mount Vernon adjacent to the Hutch and the Pelham border, named for former owner Charles Hill Wilson, 2 L's, please note, had made his fortune in lumber. The Wilson Woods Park was completed and dedicated on Independence Day, 1928, and it immediately became a popular destination for Pelhamites and residents of Mount Vernon. The pool construction was pioneering due to its enormous size, 1 million gallons, a chlorination system, and safety features. And as the newspapers exclaimed with an exclamation point, electric lights accommodated night bathing. A splendidly designed entrance, quote, through which one gets the first glimpse of the shimmering water and the immense pool beyond, unquote, greeted visitors. The 2-story Tudor Revival style bathhouse of brick, stone, and stucco was designed by architect George Bartlett to harmonize with the residential architecture of the growing suburbs. And certainly Tudor Revival was key in Mount Vernon and Pelham and New Rochelle. Built at a cost of $500,000, the massive structure not only housed handsome dressing rooms, it had a 2nd floor tea room and dance floor. The building had a capacity for 1,500 people. This woodland landscape of the park makes it one of the most attractive places in the section of the county, touted a 1928 newspaper. I think it is still today. For those who prefer either afoot or on horseback to get away from main traveled road, the Saxon Woods is especially attractive, read one of the commission's reports. In 1925, Downer urged the county's acquisition of the Edward Fail estate as parkland and a right-of-way to complete the Hutchinson River Parkway. The property was located in the former Saxton's Forest, located in the Mamaroneck Valley, and purchased by the county for $200,000. Other parcels were added to create the 700+ acre Saxon Woods. The park's 18-hole golf course, 100 acres, was opened in 1931. The clubhouse, built in 1931, was identified as illustrating the 20th century recreation development in the creation of the garden suburb. But note here, when they're building the golf course, they're still using horse-drawn plows. The pool would not be completed until 1958, and it can accommodate 2,000 swimmers. Now, a 9-hole golf course just off the Hutch, also in Mamaroneck River Valley, was purchased and expanded to an 18-hole course. It's named for the abundance of maple trees that line the course. Maplemore was designed by golf course architect Tom Whitten. A handsome brick clubhouse rivaled nearby clubhouses. Opening in 1927, it was Westchester's first publicly owned course. Now, on to the Saw Mill River Parkway, which the Park Commission called a key project in the creation of the garden suburb, as I just mentioned. Worth mentioning again. The 1924 proposal detailed the public health and welfare aspect of the interior parkway and a trunk sewer. I wonder if, take a look at these pictures. I'm just wondering if it looks similarly today. The trunk sewer would protect the valley from further despoliation and nuisance conditions of lowlands, including flooding of the valley and pollution of Yonkers' water supply. The first section of the parkway was a short bypass of downtown Yonkers, and that was completed in 1926. But then the rest become more problematic because extending it north and south both pose challenges. South, agreements had to be reached to connect it with the proposed Henry Hudson Parkway to the Bronx, and north of Yonkers, the original route had to be rerouted to the west of the railroad in order to avoid an industrial area. They couldn't take down all those buildings. This diversion through a woodland area actually enhanced the parkway's scenic value, and the next 4-mile section of the parkway from Tuckahoe Road in Yonkers to Ashford Avenue in Dobbs Ferry was completed September 1929. Another 4-mile section, which you'll hear more about, between Dobbs Ferry and New York 119 was next. This section entailed considerable grading and the construction of 2 bridges across the Saw Mill River. When this section was completed, rights-of-ways were set for an interchange with the Central Westchester Parkway, which later evolved into the Cross Westchester, and the original plans called for the Saw Mill River Parkway to end at a park along the shores of the new Croton Reservoir in Katona. Grading began on the 20-mile-long Elmsford to Katona section in the mid-1930s. But because of World War II, the completion would be delayed until 1954. So remember, the original intention was a series of parkways connecting parks. One of the earliest was Tibbetsbrook Park, which was first funded in 1923. It ticked off a number of boxes for the commission. 1, it could be reached by a pleasurable drive on the Saw Mill River Parkway and soon would be connected to Van Cortlandt Park via the Henry Hudson. 2, it served the densely populated region of Yonkers in southern Westchester. 3, the land was practically undeveloped and it was one large parcel. It was a dump for the city of Yonkers. So shaping the valley between the old Croton Aqueduct and Rumsey Road into a park was not only natural, it would reclaim land and clean up a polluted lake. Tibbetts, by the way, is derived from the 17th century property owner, George Tippetts, with a T, Tippets, whose loyalist descendants lost the property. On opening day of the park, June 26, 1927, between 15,000 and 20,000 folks helped inaugurate this fabulous place designed by J. Downer and Gilmore Clark. J. Downer's pictured here. At a cost of $2 million, they had created 2 artificial lakes, one replacing the old cattail swamp, and an enormous concrete pool for $3,000, which replaced the old polluted swimming hole, and a magnificent neoclassical design bathhouse and band shell, also referred to as a gazebo, recreational fields, and children's playgrounds. The setting was lovely and just so close to New York City, with a border on the Bronx, and it was open to everyone. V. Everett Macy, the then president of the commission, led the ceremonies. Now, moving north on the Sawmill, we come to Irvington and Ardsley, shown in this 1930 map. It's a little tricky to see. It gets sort of confusing, but I wanted to show an actual map from the 30s and the Saw Mill River Parkway coming right along through the back end of Irvington, or the east end of Irvington, and up into Greenburgh. And in creating this part of the Saw Mill River Parkway, we're showing Irvington, the village of Elmsford, and Greenburgh. These are the number and names of properties that had to be acquired. Again, some through condemnation and some were outright purchased. We have records, by the way, at the County Record Center, should you be interested in who sold. Now, this section led to another park, eventually named for V. Everett Macy. Woodlands Park, as it was first called, was created from property purchased from the Howland family and from J.P. Morgan. To give you a little orientation, I pulled a map from the tax people, because this really clearly identifies your municipalities. So here we have Greenburgh, here we have Ardsley, here we have Irvington. Woodlands Park, now V.E. Macy Park, is actually this green area and the blue area. Just to give you an orientation, the blue area today is primarily recreational, with a picnic area, ball fields, playground, comfort station, pathways. The blue area is Woodlands Lake, which was created by damming up the Saw Mill River, and that is what powered Howland's Mill. So you can see that the southern part of the park is in Ardsley, and the northeastern part is in Irvington. Back to the picture of the dam and this beautiful waterfall. Joseph Howland purchased the 100 tract in Irvington, along with the sawmill that was located there in 1816. He lived in a nearby mansion near the pond. The dam created the water power to power the mill, which was probably a grist and or flour mill. From the mid-1800s into the 1900s, the Woodland Lake Waterfall Park became a local recreational spot for swimming, fishing, and picnics. It was privately owned. The fields were used by traveling circuses. Later, the Woodlands Lake Hotel and the Reinhardt Hotel attracted vacationers and lovers of Bavarian cuisine. Many of them would arrive at the Woodlands station via the Putnam Rail or by car. But if they did by rail, they'd walk over or drive over the bridge to the hotels that were located at the water's edge. When the commission snatched up the abandoned property in 1923, little work was needed on the 203 acres of woodlands and meadows, except the planting of 1,000 12 to 15 high trees from the old nursery at Mohansick. May 2nd, 1932, the park was renamed for Valentine Everett Macy Sr. The Saw Mill River Parkway was completed the same year. The new roadside restaurant was built. It was called over the years Layton's, as you see here. I think most of us of a certain age remember it's La Cantina, and maybe remember our first margarita in one of the first Mexican restaurants in Westchester, right there off the Saw Mill River Parkway. And it was finally called the Roadhouse until it closed for good in 1995. The old rail bed is now part of the South County Trailway, of course, one of 4 trails replacing the former line. And the road bridge over the dam became a connecting trail to the park. More on that later. So who was V. Everett Macy? Well, at the death of his father in 1876, he inherited over $20 million. He was 5 years old, but he never rested on the windfall or his connection to Standard Oil. He devoted much of his life improving the lives of underserved, vulnerable people. He served as the commissioner of the Westchester County Department of Charities and Corrections from 1913 to 19, and then on to the commissioner of public welfare in 1925. And it was that commitment, his commitment to the health and well-being of people in Westchester, that he became the president of the Parks Commission. And he served on that in that position from 1926 until his untimely death in 1930. David Rockefeller Jr. called him the kindest man I ever knew. Rockefeller was the Park Commission chair at the time of the park's dedication. He and other friends raised the money for the pillars and for a memorial to Macy. These pillars, there are 4 of them. And I have to be honest, I don't know if they're still there. I imagine they are. Somebody can put in the chat if they know more about the pillars. But I do know that this still, the memorial, the pathway that they paid for, and thousands of trees and native plants. The pathway goes in about a half mile on the east side of Saw Mill River Parkway to a rock outcropping where the plaque to V. Everett Macy is pinned into the rock. And as you see, they have a great tribute to him as a great citizen of Westchester, again, talking about his benefactions and his deeds of kindness. And this, as you probably, many of you know, the property connects with your wonderful Irvington Woods trails. 2 maps of the same thing, but just to give you an orientation, the Ardsley part of V.E. Macy Park is down here. It's not in this map, but you see Woodland Lake, Saw Mill River Parkway, and here's the V.E. Macy, and here are the trails through the woods. Here is the map from the Woods organization itself. Fabulous trails, and I am sure that the Westchester Park Commission would just be absolutely thrilled and delighted to know that their acquisition connects with this wonderful preserve, so that you in Irvington have a great deal to do with the V.E. Macy Park. In the park, there is the Great Hunger Memorial, which was dedicated in June 2001. That's in the Woodland Park area. And here's a picture of the Ardsley Park part of the V.E. Macy Park. Now, as you might know, much of the park has been closed because of work being done on the dam. I thought it would be important, even though this is about the past. There was an August 1st, 2022 press release from the county about the restoration of the Saw Mill River and the removal of the Woodlands Lake Dam in the park. It's a $4.9 million million capital project that will remove a portion of the existing dam, install a new pedestrian bridge using old dam supports, reshape the river to create a series of weirs and pools, and install an extensive selection of native trees. The press release continues that the removal of the dam will lead to river restoration, removal, and a removal of a barrier to fish passage and protect upstream wetlands. It's due to be completed fairly soon. Two sections in the center of Westchester were among the initial acquisitions, but their potential was not immediately realized. Silver Lake Parks, which the commission's report called charm and its rugged natural scenery, was undeveloped land that adjoined White Plains watershed and reservoir lands of New York City for a recreation area of more than 830 acres at the head of Mamaroneck River. By the way, the site had significant colonial history, and the northern section still contains the ruins of Stony Hill Settlement, one of the earliest settlements of free enslaved individuals, the land for which had been purchased by their former enslavers, members of the Purchase Meeting House. Ridge Road Park in Hartsdale was another acquisition in 1925. But the structures were not built until funding from the WPA in 1942. Starting with Blue Mountain Reservation, we'll now visit the Hudson River Parks. In their 1926 year, the commission set its sights on 1,000 acres in the upper northwest corner of the county, the Lounsbury Farm. The next year, Blue Mountain Reservation opened. Its woodland hills and dales allowing for great hiking and spectacular views. This was another of the county parks served well by the Civilian Conservation Corps. They were responsible for the 1933's comfort stations, maintenance building, trail lodge, residence trail lodge, and office, all constructed with similar style, scale, and materials, including fieldstone, brick, dark wooden, board and batten, slate, and wood shingles, just like the national parks. The commission swooped in on a 242-acre tract of land just 4 miles from Peekskill in the hamlet of Krugers. The property included an abandoned mansion called Boscobel. It had been built by loyalist States Dykeman, and during World War II, the government bought the property for $125,000 for a hospital for wounded veterans. It was the Franklin D. Roosevelt Hospital, a complex of 37 buildings that were built on the then 383-acre site. Boscobel was reconstructed in 1957 in Garrison. Thank goodness for that campaign. Croton Point Park. Now, this park needs a program all by itself, and Mark Shesher, the Croton historian, does a fabulous one. It's so chock full of history. From the start, when the commission purchased the Hudson River property, it recognized the opportunities afforded by the diverse physical aspects and the cultural and the historical features of the property. Sandy beaches for swimming and boating, level meadows and wooded slopes for athletic fields, playgrounds, and camps. Quote, the spirit of the Aborigines hover over the remains of the fortified village of the Indian Sachem Croton, and Indian shell beds, several thick, are still seen along the Hudson shore, the 1924 commission exclaimed. Quote, during the Revolution, the conspicuous position of the point naturally made it the scene of stirring incidents, including the firing of the British sloop of war Vulture, which brought Andre up from New York. In 1804, Robert T. Underhill bought the point, and the Underhill vineyards that were cultivated here would gain national attention. The New York Times recommended in their December 31st, 1840 edition, pure wines for the holidays, delicious native wines from the truly celebrated vineyards of Dr. Underhill of Croton Point. By the way, the vaults are still intact, as are the buildings that house the hundreds of workers and Underhill's 2 lucrative brickyards of the Underhill Brickyard midway down the southern portion of the point. At the height of their business, the Underhills operated these brickyards, employing several hundred men. These are relics of a small community that included a school, a store, a tavern, and a boarding house for seasonal workers. Today, this park continues to represent many important eras and movements in Westchester's history. The oldest oyster shell middens on the North Atlantic coast were uncovered by archaeologists on Croton Point and confirmed that the peninsula was inhabited by Native Americans as early as 7,000 years ago. Early in time, as 7,000 years ago. When the Westchester Board of Supervisors purchased the park in 1923, they continued access to the recreational area that had begun at the turn of the century. It's sort of grown into an informal amusement park. A tent city of long-standing bungalows was then raised for baseball fields. Here's Point Pleasant Park, which was the informal, and the bungalows that were torn down so that a dance hall with a sleepaway camp for children could be built overlooking the river in what they called Squaw Cove. At a minimum cost to the camp, it would bring health-giving vacations under sanitary supervision within reach of children who probably would not otherwise have a summer outing, said the annual report. I should tell you that for a short time, they also ran a camp for tired mothers. And when I used to work for the Westchester Park Commission, for the Westchester Parks Department, I single-handedly tried to revive that camp for tired mothers because I needed it. And only lasted 2 years, unfortunately, way back in the 30s. So in a winter 2022 issue of the Westchester historian, Bob Mayer wrote an article on golf in Westchester. And in that he wrote about another group who had announced intentions to purchase what's now Croton Point Park. The August 28th, 1923 New York Times reported, the Westchester County Park Commission stepped in yesterday and bought Croton Point a few hours after a syndicate of Harlem Negroes announced it expected to purchase the 300-acre tract for an all-year Negro Atlantic City. The article continued that the county's reasons were to protect the point's historical and environmental importance. Land for Hudson River Parks to meet the needs land for a Hudson River Park to meet the needs of Terrytown's, quote, industrial workers was acquired in 1925. The property that would become Kingsland Point Park was donated to the village of North Terrytown in 1898 and then purchased by the commission through condemnation and $1 to Terrytown. The property included a marsh at the north of the Picantico River and a mansion that once had belonged to Ambrose Kingsland, a shipping magnate and one-time mayor of New York City, who summered here. The 1926 bathhouse was designed by Walter Blair, who also designed Terrytown's Warner Library. It's a charming Spanish Mediterranean-ish building. So a quick word about the Terrytown Lighthouse, which is so closely associated and physically connected by bridge to Kingsland Point Park. It's one of only 7 extant lighthouses on the Hudson and operated from October 1st, 1883 to 1958, when it was rendered obsolete by the lights on the new Tappan Zee Bridge. The General Services Administration transferred ownership of the lighthouse to the County of Westchester in 1974, and it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979 and has undergone the most spectacular restoration by Steve Tilley and his associates. I am so thrilled that it was painted again. It looks so much better, and it's just a real treasure for the County of Westchester. The Commission's largest acquisition of contiguous land was not on the Hudson, but found in Pound Ridge in Lewisboro. The 1925 annual report noted much progress in the acquisition of about 2,900 acres of the cheapest land in the county. It was deemed accessible to all. The sparsely populated area was still rugged territory with rolling meadows and hilly woodlands that were ideal in meeting the need for the ever-growing demands of picnicking and camping. Now, originally part of Cortlandt Manor, the stone walls that crisscross this land were laid by at least 30 18th century farmers, some of whose houses were also part of the purchase, and some still stand. The other structures are the trail shelters that were constructed in 1926, seen here, for one-night use only, by the Civilian Conservation Corps between 1933 and 1944. Camp Merkel, the CCC station, was eventually named after County Park Superintendent Mr. Merkel, housed 200 enrollees who planted trees, installed roads, and built bridges, walls, latrines, and the Trailside Museum. In 1938, the park was named for the man who made the entire system possible, Boss Ward. It would gain nearly 1,000 acres more in 1954. Now we're coming down to our last two parks, and they're on Long Island Sound. We're now in my territory. Off the shore of New Rochelle, nearly at the Pelham line, the world's pleasure grounds were lying abandoned, ready to become another of the commission's earliest acquisitions. Just 40 years early, just 40 years, in 1880, John Starren had created Glen Island Resort, one of America's first theme parks. The resort was a cluster of islands that were connected by footbridges, and that you see here, and chain ferries, actually a ferry pulled by a chain. Starren was the owner of the largest fleet of steamboats, and he shuttled tens of thousands of passengers here each day, mostly from New York City. Once on the island, these steamships came one after the other after the other. The first year, 500,000 people visited. Once on the island, they enjoyed a zoo, a bathhouse for 800, a banquet hall for 4,000, a miniature railroad, botanical gardens, and much, much more. Here in this picture, these are pictures, by the way, from John Starren's scrapbook, which we have in the collection of the New Rochelle Public Library. Here you see a pagoda that would ring out each time one of the steamships would pull in. He created this destination to keep his steamboats going, and the destination on some of the islands had recreated villages. This one was Klein Deutschland, where men in Lederhausen sang as they served New Rochelle lager beer. It was Little Germany, Starnberg's Castle. And later there would be a Little Holland with women in clogs serving ice cream. They had their little hats. There was a windmill. Another one was a Hindustan village. There was a Filipino village. He had the audacity, John Starren did, to import an entire Sioux tribe in 1902. We think that Walt Disney got his idea for Epcot from this place. It was a marvel, and everybody knew the world's pleasure grounds, John Starren's Glen Island Resort. The commission purchased the islands. By the way, this could also have a program on its own. In fact, I have a program just on Glen Island. It met its demise as a result of a terrible maritime accident. The General Slocum went down near North Brother Island, which is near today's Riker prison, and over 1,000, primarily women and children, were killed in that accident. It was the worst maritime accident. It was not a Starren steamboat, but it started giving people pause about taking a steamboat for recreation. Then one of his did have a fatality as well. So through fits and starts, the place closed down. It was abandoned when the commission purchased it for a little over $500,000. The other alternative was a garbage dump. So yippee. Some New Rochelle residents put up vociferous opposition. They were sure it was going to be overrun by people from the Bronx. But the New Rochelle Chamber of Commerce prevailed, and within 2 years, the islands were filled in to make one large island. 26 buildings were raised, and these were charming, beautiful little buildings, as you can see. This was not a honky-tonk place. He did everything with style. They planted trees and shrubs. Visitors could watch it all from a makeshift ferry because they had a ferry powered by a tractor bringing people over for a 1925 early season. In the commission's 27 report, it estimated the cost of the bridge was $450,000. Its restoration, by the way, that will maintain it for another 50 years is estimated at $48 million. Yes, because it will not only replace the Bascule Bridge, but they have to create a temporary Bascule Bridge. It's a complicated and very convoluted situation. This Bascule Bridge was required by the War Department because there are yacht clubs on the other side, and it does provide access that can only be used as an alternative at high tide. Yes, I said it's a little complicated, but the Bascule Bridge still operates today. And this is the bridge that brings the parks people over to the second busiest park in Westchester. So it was acquired in 1924, and in 1929, everything was completed, and a procession of cars filled with New Rochelle County and state officials rolled over the new causeway, and following speeches and photo ops, they all gathered in what was built on the old casino of John Starron's, now called Glen Island Casino, not for gambling, but for dancing and music. And that first year, opening the season, was teetotaler, because it was Prohibition time, Oswald Nelson and his girl singer Harriet Hillard. Ozzie and Harriet would play the first 2 seasons, followed by the Castellama Orchestra, the Dorsey Brothers, Les Brown and his little-known girl singer Doris Day, Benny Goodman, Woody Herman, Gene Krupa, and of course, Glenn Miller finalized the great big band era during World War II. Meanwhile, just up the coast a bit, another amusement park was evolving. In 1923, the County Board of Supervisors authorized $600,000 for 160 acres of Nursing Island and an adjacent marsh area. When fully developed, the annual report stated, it will provide the most commodious and best bathing facilities within the limits of the county. The plans included the creation of a saltwater lake for canoeing, boating, and saltwater bathing, with surrounding marshlands, lagoons, and picturesque wooded islands. In 1925, another $2.5 million was appropriated for another 54 acres of Rye Beach. The huge salt marsh behind the park was dredged, providing fill for building purposes and creating a large brackish lake. In 1985, the lake, the adjacent shoreline, and adjacent fields and woodlands were set aside by the county as a wildlife sanctuary. The sanctuary was named for Edith C.G. Reed to honor her work as an environmental advocate in Westchester County. The commission then set out to develop an unequaled seaside public park to provide clean, wholesome recreation for the people of Westchester County. Wholesome was the key word, as the acquired property involved 2 rinky-dink amusement areas on 15 acres. They continue to operate under county management for the 1926 and 1927 season, but then, the day after Labor Day, 1927, an army of workers moved into the area to begin demolition. They were followed by carpenters, painters, gardeners, and other personnel who, under the direction of amusement park planner and manager Frank Darling, created a family amusement park unlike any other in just 2 years. So on May 26, 1928, Playland was formally dedicated. The site plan for Playland was drawn by Darling and Gilmore Clark, the commission's head landscape designer, in conjunction with commission engineers Holleran and Downer. but the park itself was designed by the preeminent award-winning architectural firm of Walker and Gillette. Playland was the first of the firm's signature Art Deco buildings in Westchester. The other would be the county center. Playland's design was intentionally unified and classically designed in its symmetry, with the Art Deco music tower at one end and the flower and tree-lined mall and the fountain plaza at the other. Colonnades on both sides would shield the aesthetically less pleasing rides. The mall was dissected by a cross promenade. They also created a saltwater pool overlooking the expansive beach and boardwalk. Just look at that crowd. And a boathouse at Menursing Lake, along with a picnic grove along by the beach. You can see one of the tall ships. This was the pier for incoming steamboats that would also come from Manhattan, bringing recreators for the day. Fred A. Church was brought in to engineer the rides. Considered the best in his field, his Bob's-type roller coaster, called the Aeroplane Coaster, operated from 1926 to 1957, and it's often hailed as the greatest wooden coaster ever made. Their earliest rides also included the Grand Carousel, the Derby Racer, the Whip, the Old Mill, and the Dragon Coaster, all of which are individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places, as is Kittyland. The entire park is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Playland is the only one of two amusement parks that has the ultimate designation as a national landmark. By 1929, the commission had completed 140 miles of parkways and it ensured 16,500 acres of parkland for Westchester residents. From the start, the commission was able to show that the development of the parks and parkways was fiscally sound. It opened new residential sections and spurred the construction of apartment buildings near the parkways. And it was cited as being the chief factor in an increase in property values. In 1929, the income from the golf courses, concessions, and beaches, notably the unique amusement center at Playland, led to a substantial surplus over the total operating budget. A few years later, when the commission's future was questioned, an editorial in the New York Times had this to say: "Whatever the fate of the Westchester Park Commission, its past is secure. The achievement of that body is one of monumental American contributions of engineering and landscaping to enhancing of democracy's estate." The editorial continues extolling the commission's preservation of nature, increased mobility, generous architectural taste, and for ensuring that so much land would be public land. It concluded with these remarks about the commission members: "They are entitled to the lasting and proud gratitude of the people of Westchester, and indeed of all others to whom the county furnishes such attractive environment in their comings and goings." And that concludes my program. I am, as you heard, Barbara Davis. I am at the Westchester County Historical Society. I hope you come and visit us. We have reading room hours every Wednesday by appointment by calling the county archives. We're one-stop shopping for both public and private documents, manuscripts, all kinds of treasures. We're also always available for questions via email or phone. Patrick Raftery, our fabulous librarian and associate director, knows everything and can usually answer or know where to find them. And as well as my co-director, Suzanne Panditch, some of you might know as the former director of Lyndhurst and then former staff member of the Rockefeller's Fund. So I am going to stop share and turn my video on, And now we'll get to see chat room. It's so can't hear anybody. So let's go to chat. The first question is, the Park Commission was doing its work. How did planning for recreation fit in outside of golf? Well, the Recreation Commission, those women had met constantly. They hired a professional commissioner, and they started doing all kinds of programs, not only at the county center, but at each of the parks, with an eye to what they called underprivileged, we might say underserved populations, sometimes with a little bit of sort of upper crusty kind of attitude, but in the long run, they did provide great recreational opportunities. It's too bad that Woodlands Lake is no more, is one of the other comments. What were the origins of Rye Playland? I think I answered that, but if you have further questions, it was sort of these two honky-tonk amusement parks because Rye was a beach community, a resort community, and these were boardwalk, fun things, attracting the tourists who came to spend days at the beach. Those were torn down and Playland was created. Thank you. Where am I located? The County Record Center is in Elmsford, 2199 Saw Mill River Road. Right now, I'm located in New Rochelle. And more, do you know why the water no longer flows down at the Kensico Dam? I don't know the answer to that. I know that there used to be fountains at the bottom, and I think there's talk about restoring those fountains. I wasn't aware that the water came over the dam. Is Glen Island open today? Oh yes, absolutely. But as a county park with beach, there's a picnic grove. There are a few relics of John Starron's Glen Island Resort. The castle structure is still there. There's a cannon that he used to shoot every 4th of July. There's some statuary. I know that there's an elephant buried out there. And there's a few other relics. There's also interpretive signs all around. The Glen Island Casino was transformed into the Glen Island Harbor Club, which is a catering hall, lots of weddings there, on the same footprint, or a little larger, but in the same area as the original Glen Island Casino, which was built on the property, of the original casino of John Starron's Glen Island Resort. It's one of my favorite topics, you might be able to tell. I used to run waterfront tours out of New Rochelle, and I would cover all the shoreline, which is fascinating. And we have lots of islands. And I used to do tours on the Hudson too, but I have to say, Long Island Sound has more islands, and you can see more from the shore because its shoreline wasn't as protected by the Grand Homes as the Hudson was. Is Saxon Woods open to all residents? Yes. You have to get a county card, but I think they actually do the park passes right at Saxon Woods. You can go to the website, the County Parks and Rec website, and they give you the information on how you can get a card. I think you can also maybe go to their headquarters, which is very close to Irvington, right on Saw Mill River Road on Ardsley. And I think Victoria was, since we don't seem to have any more questions, I think Victoria want to pop back on to close. Oh wait, there's one more. Along the Saw Mill River Parkway's west side are the remnants of an old but abandoned trail with old benches. Part of it may now belong to the village. Is there any chance that the county could refurbish that trail? Could be. They seem to be in that business. I'm not with the county parks department, so I can't answer that, but certainly I would send a note to Commissioner Kathy O'Connor and suggest that. Sorry, the right photo on the side labeled Bronx River Parkway, it looks just like the pathway looks now. Wondering what it was. I don't know. If you haven't walked the Bronx River Parkway, now you can go almost the entire length. There's one other section that they're working on, but the part that they just opened between Scarsdale and Hartsdale is so much fun. You have to duck when you go under the bridges, and it's just gorgeous. And they've done a lot of native planting along the way. I enjoy it thoroughly, both all ends of the pathway. So I'll be quiet now.
Hello, everyone. This is Veronica Goodrich, President of the Irvington Historical Society. And thank you, Barbara, for a wonderful program. And thank you all for attending today. Remember, this program has been recorded. So if you missed any part of it, or someone who hasn't seen it and would like to, it will be posted on our website.